It Chapter 2 is the follow-up to It, which was a massive hit back in 2017. This film covers the other half of Stephen King's novel, where the kids from the first film have all grown up and return to Derry, Maine 27 years later to finish off Pennywise the Clown once and for all. Andy Muschietti returns to direct from the first film, bringing along new cast members such as James McAvoy, Jessica Chastain, and Bill Hader playing the adult versions of the Losers Club. Bill Skarsgård of course returns as Pennywise the Clown, ready to terrify audiences once more in a performance that he'll always be remembered for. The first thing that the movie needs to be commended on is the casting, by finding a cast that naturally feels like older versions of our characters from the first film. Bill Hader as an older Richie is without a doubt the best casting decision that's been made with this film. Not only does Bill Hader get all the best lines and biggest laughs in the film, but he also gets the most meaningful character arc, because as we've seen with his HBO show Barry, Bill Hader is an excellent dramatic actor and brings a lot of gravity in the film's more serious moments. There's definitely an adjustment period in the first act as we get introduced to the new cast. This new group of actors certainly feel like the losers grown up, and the performances in the film are really strong. However, the lack of some characterization and that youthful chemistry and energy of the younger cast definitely kept me from connecting with the older versions straight away. The new actors eventually warmed up to me by the time the third act rolled around, as a lot of effort is spent developing these characters through comedy, which helped make them feel relatable and interesting. In fact, you'll probably spend a great deal of this movie laughing, just as much as you're jumping out of your seat. However, Warner Brothers and Andy Muschietti know that we're all here because of the kids from the first film, and rest assured, there are plenty of scenes featuring the younger cast, where a number of them have been digitally de-aged. But you still feel a sudden burst of energy whenever there's a flashback and the younger cast is all there on screen. There are also some fantastic transitions between the young and old cast members that I thought were executed wonderfully. It's clear that those kids have become really close, and their chemistry just ignites the film with a rush of levity and familiarity. So much so that the frequency that the kids actually do appear in the film can often detract from any connection to the older cast, where at times it can feel like I'm enjoying the older cast because they're extensions of the kids, rather than enjoying the actors' take on Eddie or Stan. Anyone familiar with the book or even the miniseries should appreciate some key moments that have been re-envisioned for the big screen, where moments like the Paul Bunyan sequence are pulled off incredibly well, or the Adrian Mellon scene being just as horrific as it is in the book. That being said, not all of the scares work as well as others. The pacing and build up to these scares can at times feel a little rushed, as the movie is trying to get through so much story, even though it's 169 minutes long. The first movie was fairly criticized for having scares occur whenever a character decides to wander off alone, and Chapter 2 follows that methodology to a degree, although there is an effort to subvert that expectation of characters going off on their own, where a couple of characters make some very funny meta jokes about the trope. Chapter 2 also relies more heavily on CGI to create its monsters and scares. Considering the huge profit that the first movie made, Chapter 2 was produced with double the budget of Chapter 1, so there's less restraint from Muschietti when revealing certain monsters or forms of Pennywise. There's a conscious effort to go big with a lot of these sequences, and most of them are wildly entertaining and imaginative, with some brilliant staging and shot construction, particularly in the third act, which swings for the fences with some of the wackier concepts from Stephen King's novel. However, there are sequences in the film that lack the threat that was felt in the first film, as there's too much time spent on a CGI monster in broad open daylight, or a sequence is played more for comedy than horror, and so at times the movie can lose a bit of its edge and wind up a little predictable as a result. What surprised me is how faithful the movie is to the book, and to Stephen King in general, as there are some really fun nods and Easter eggs to look out for. As Chapter 1 did, Chapter 2 grounds some of the more cosmic elements from the book, attempting to reimagine and modernize some of the aspects that were a bit out there. However, there are some interesting changes, like certain subplots being cut out, that I actually thought worked quite well, so I am curious to see how book readers react to the film. The main issue with Chapter 2 is its runtime and pacing. As I mentioned earlier, the film clocks in at 169 minutes, and by the end of the film I was pretty ready to get up and stretch. The first act is concerned with quickly getting us reacquainted with the losers, while the second act sees the losers all searching for certain items, and it's the second act that gets a bit messy, where we're jumping around from horrific scares to comedy or exposition on the mythology of Pennywise. The flow between these scenes can feel uneven, as more attention is given to bigger sequences than others, leading some moments in the film to really excel, while others can drag. The third act, however, is excellently constructed, with some incredibly crafted and memorable sequences that I can't wait to revisit. Ultimately, Muschietti brings the film to a very satisfying conclusion that acutely honors our investment with these characters and actors over the past two It films. The ending treads a little into Return of the King territory, as it does take a while to get to the conclusion. But honestly, if you're a big fan of the book and the first film, the ending will likely give you the satisfaction that you're after. It Chapter 2 is a wildly violent and entertaining thrill ride that gets most things right, while faltering when it comes to the pacing and execution of some of the scares. Chapter 1 was certainly a much tighter and more focused horror experience, with better designed horror sequences and a lot of the groundwork for that script done by Cary Fukunaga when he was attached to direct corrects Chapter 1. However, there's still plenty to enjoy with Chapter 2, especially if you're out catching it with friends looking for a fun time. If there's a director's cut in the future that fixes some of the pacing issues, I'd certainly be interested in exploring that back to back with the first film for the complete It experience. It Chapter 2 gets a 7.8 out of 10 from me. Guys, I hope you like this review. If you want to see more reviews just like this one, stay right here for your Monofix. Bye guys.